Hi everyone, welcome back to the OT Miri channel. My name is Miri, I'm a licensed occupational therapist, and for today's video, I've invited my very close friends, Noémie and Emilio, to speak with them about their recent experience taking the NBCOT exam. And the idea for this video was actually conceived a while back during the pandemic when I was getting a lot of questions and emails from you guys related to how to prepare for the exam, especially in light of the pandemic that sort of changed the world for many of us overnight. And while we aren't in the thick of it anymore, and we've somewhat adjusted to this new normal, I think their experience of having prepared for the exam during the pandemic is still relevant in the sense that it shows how we need to be adaptable and flexible and resourceful when we're preparing for the exam, because so much of this preparation is mental. And there are so many things that can come our way, things that are unpredictable, curveballs, that just come out of nowhere and hit us in the face. And this journey can feel so isolating and lonely. And so pandemic or not, I think these are still issues that many of us have been dealing with. And I think the pandemic just sort of brought these issues to the forefront and forced people to sit there uncomfortably with these feelings and come up with strategies to overcome them. So I'm curious to hear how Noémie and Emilio did, and what strategies they employ to overcome a challenge, a curveball as big and great as the pandemic while preparing for the exam. And I hope that it'll be helpful to you and that you will find a little, words of wisdom or motivation or tips that might help you along the way. So here is Emilio and Noémie. Thank you guys both so much for being here today.
Well, thank you for having us. I appreciate it so much. It's exciting to finally get to do this with you. But my name is Emilio Vivacencio. I am an occupational therapist. I graduated in May of 2020, with my last day of fieldwork being the day of lockdown. So I was an early pandemic graduate. And now I'm currently working in home health as an independent contractor, where I'm seeing a variety of different patients in different settings. So it's been really fun, a little challenging as a new practitioner, but I feel like it's helped me grow in quite a bit. I also work in a skilled nursing facility as a PRN, per diem therapist. And those settings are quite busy. So I'm keeping myself busy and learning a lot through there, and, really getting to treat some of the even COVID patients, which was something that, was brand new to me, and continuing to grow and learn a lot with that as well. And I actually got to meet Miri and Noémie. I'll kind of introduce how we all met. When I was in grad school, I was actually had the honor of being the SOTA president. So it's a Student Occupational Therapy Association at our school. I attended Dominican University of California. And I was the president kind of by accident. It's kind of happened that way, where I jumped in and I took this wild chance, and I said yes when I was asked, because there was a series of events that led up to it where they had this position available. And so one thing led to another, and I truly enjoyed it and got to do so much, learned a lot. And then I transitioned into other positions along the way, one of them being the student representative to ASD, which is Assembly Student Delegate. And then from there, I was a student representative to the Representative Assembly. And funny enough, we actually, Noémie was a student there as well. And she actually took over almost every single one of those positions. She kind of followed in those same footsteps. So it was really nice, and had no doubt that she would do amazing. And she did. She thrived and did a great job with that. And in between that transition, we had asked OT Miri to come speak as a guest speaker at our school. And it was, everybody, it was a request from everybody. So we were happy to have her there. And she was just, as awesome and down to earth and amazing as she is, on this channel in person. She's great. And we've been able to maintain that friendship. So really happy to be here. And I'll let Noémie take over.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Emilio and Miri, for welcoming me with all of this love. I really appreciate it. So yeah, I'm Noémie, and I just got registered and licensed in California. So I'm a brand new grad, and looking forward to getting into the OT world. And yeah, thank you, Emilio, for setting all of that up. I was the co-president of the SOTA at Dominican University of California. And we just had so much pleasure having OT Miri join us. And it's so nice to cultivate that friendship throughout these last few years and beyond this. So I just want to thank you, Miri, for having us and for being such a great support for this community and for having us here today.
It's my pleasure. You know, when I met you guys, I knew we'd be friends forever. And I am really thankful for our friendship that's continuing to blossom even through this pandemic. And I'm really grateful that you're giving your time to speak to this experience, because it's been a while since I've taken the exam. And so with that, I want to ask you guys, what was it like? How long did you allocate to study, and what were some of the resources you guys found to be helpful?
So I used a lot of resources. I knew coming into this experience that I wanted to really set myself up with all the resources I could get my hands on. And I used a variety of websites and textbooks and YouTubers and podcasters. So I knew that I would be more of a well-rounded studier as I could, because I knew that I preferred a video format of learning, and rather than read it, like I'm a visual and kinesthetic learner rather than a read and write learner. So I really wanted to tap into that. So I had used the NBCOT exam prep study pack, the AOTA website. I used the NBCOT exam therapy ed book. I used all my school notes. I had used, I had made like cheat sheets, 1-page cheat sheets of all my like main topics. And then I transferred them online to with the website Canva to make like pretty little infographics.
Wow.
Yeah. And then YouTubers, I watched this channel. It has so many great resources. I used your website as well, Miri. Thank you. I watched OT Dude, OT Rex, OT Minute, OT Over Easy, and then some podcasters I loved were the OT Exam Prepper and the OT Exam Audio and the Daily Occupation. I ended up studying for 2 months, so 8 weeks.
Okay. And did you feel that that was sufficient for you?
I did. Yeah, I broke it down. For the first month, I really focused on the content, and the second month, more of the questions. So I planned it out that I would take a practice exam on the day of the week that I had planned my exam date. And I really try to simulate the experience. I wore a mask in my room. I cleared my desk. I had like just my computer and a piece of scratch paper and a pen. And I timed myself and everything. And then other days I would take practice questions, but not a full practice exam. And then, yeah, the second month I focused just on the questions and making sure my rationale was aligned.
That's great. How about you, Emilio? What was your study plan like?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's interesting. I thought those were all really good tips. And I was just reflecting back and looking at the contrast between what Noémie has been saying and my experience with it. So for me, I actually, another big difference was that a lot of these facilities were going kind of shut down actually in the beginning. And so they started to reopen, and there was very limited test times and dates and locations. And the only available dates were 3 months essentially, or 3 weeks. And so I opted out for the 3 weeks because I was so anxious to kind of get out there and really help where I could. You know, we were all going through this pandemic, and I know people were getting, just overworked and, experiencing this burnout and just understaffed and things like that. So I was very eager to get in there and help if I could. And so I did the 3 weeks, and very much what Noémie said, she mimicked her, the environment, and what you said, Miri, about, you know, having the sterile environment, having nothing around. And to add to that, I also studied for the same amount of time that I knew I was allotted for that test. So if I think it was 4 hours. If it was 4 hours, I sat there, no phone, nothing, even no water, because I knew going into it that I didn't want to like take breaks if I could help it. So I had no water. I had a breakfast just like I would, because I scheduled my appointment for 10 o'clock. So I think that's another good tip or strategy, is to really focus on like when you're most optimal, when your brain is bright and ready for this 4 hours of, you know, excruciating pain of taking this test. But really is, you know, kind of listen to your body. You know, if you know that you are a morning person, then maybe schedule a little bit earlier. I know I was kind of around that 10 o'clock when my brain starts to finally wake up, even after coffee. And so I scheduled it then, had my breakfast, and then would study for that 4 hours without breaks, if I could do it. And so that was one, and I had 3 weeks to study. So I really had to stay focused and on schedule. And I will show you kind of what I did here and the resources that I used. This is a ginormous book. I did use the therapy ed. This is my main guide. But first thing I had to do was create a schedule. So I created a schedule that had everything broken down. I don't think anybody could see this, but you guys, if you guys have an idea of what this will look like, this is has dates and stuff like that. It's broken down by topic, and columns here are going to be the different resources that I have. So for AOTA PDFs was my first one. Since I was on a crunch, I wanted really succinct and really clear guides of what I was studying and what was most important. And then the next one was therapy ed, and they were actually matched up. So if the AOT PDF says it was cardiopulmonary, then that would be chapter 8 for the therapy ed book, and it'd be cardiopulmonary as well. And the third column right here, it's actually titled OT Miri /other. So all the other resources, you know, OT Miri, I don't know why I'm calling you OT Miri. Miri, I would listen to your channel right before bed, actually. So it's like my little nighttime stories. I just felt as though I would study really hard, make really good notes, and then at the end kind of recap. It was really nice to like let my brain relax a little bit. Instead of me putting in that work, I was kind of letting somebody else teach the material. So that was very nice. And then I know I'm already going off a little bit, but when I was actually doing my studying, I was taking notes as if I was writing test questions, which I did throughout school too. So that was very fun. And I especially did them for questions that were, or topics that I wasn't very good at. Pediatrics was one of them. So I'll kind of show you how I did that. I got very detailed with my like drawings because I'm a doodler, but so this would be like my developmental stages. Drawing always really helped me. So I was able to do that. And then let's see if I could find some of the questions. Well, essentially I would write out test questions because I thought if I could teach it, that meant I was, you know, I knew the material. And so I would write the questions, and then the next day I would start my day off with covering the answer and going through each question one by one. So that was really fun.
I love that, Emilio. It's so funny because I forgot to mention this, but I would write questions for my friends to take.
So many great tips, Noémie and Emilio. I love it. I like the idea of teach it to learn it. I always believe that if you can teach it, that means that you really have a grasp. And I think in one of the videos I had mentioned that, you know, I use my nephew. He's 8 years old. And if he doesn't understand it, then I haven't explained it in a way that's simple enough, which means that it's convoluted even in my own mind. And so, Emilio, that binder though, like one of these days, I have to meet up and I want to look at that binder and all the content in it because that looks incredible.
It's a thick binder, that's for sure. And it's, you know, it's helpful now as a practitioner. I'll sometimes look back and I'll have questions for myself, like what treatments can I do? Or, you know,
oh my God.
definitions.
I couldn't produce that in 3 weeks, let alone study while producing something like that. But it seems like that was your process. Creating those resources was your process of mastering the content. And this is the thing, we all learn so differently.
Absolutely. And just to add on to that, there's a whole mindset shift that has like happened during my studying time, because it's no longer, even throughout grad school, it's no longer, I just need to memorize this to pass this test. It's, I need to know what the best option is for me to serve my patients right and how to best serve them. And we're all doing this for our patients, but I really tapped into those rationale, the explanation and the rationale after the questions, even if I picked the right answer. But especially if I had a wrong answer, I really wanted to know, like, why is that the right answer and why is that the wrong answer? And it does really help with that clinical reasoning part. If you put in the perspective of, I need to know this for practice versus I need to know this to pass this exam.
Absolutely. That's an important point. I agree with you. In school, we did do a lot of memorization and that was enough. And you're still like, oh, I have, 2 years, I have another year. But by the time you're taking the board exam after that, you're sort of like on your own, depending on the setting. And you don't have any mini resources. You can't just go up to your professor and ask questions. So yeah, I think enhancing your clinical reasoning and really understanding the rationale and clinical implications of the choices that you make, I think that's really important. Now, I want to talk about the actual exam day, what that felt like and how it was different. Like some of the processes might be different right now. And I don't know if it still is due to COVID and if it was different than what you had expected. And if so, how?
A couple of things that were surprising to me was that 4 hours at home was way different than 4 hours there. I think even though I practiced in a very similar environment, I was still very, very exhausted at the end of this test. I think it was just the stress of having no sound, absolutely no sound in there, people kind of peeking in through the window. You're trying to read as fast as you can, and these questions were like miles long sometimes. Like, I just need the important stuff. And so you're trying to gather all this information, and I think a little bit the nerves, even though I accounted for not drinking a lot of liquids, I had to get up and use the bathroom a couple of times, and I would like rush back. And I actually was running out of time at the very end. I think it was like the scariest thing. I think I had like 30 questions left, or it was a very high number, at least 30, and like 10 minutes left. And so I started to panic and really start to read a lot faster, and my timing was a little off. But the second thing was when I arrived, I was sitting in my car for a little bit. I got there early, and when I walked in, my temperature was a little high. And so they're like, well, you can't come in, you can't test. And that made my heart race, and I was probably getting even more hot. So I was like, okay, like, well, why don't we check your temperature in about 5 or 10 minutes, and we'll come back in. So that's what happened. I went in, I drank more water. Oh, that's probably why I had to go to the bathroom. I kind of forgot about that. So I had to drink more water because I think I dehydrated myself, and I was like just running hot. Now that I'm looking back, I think that's probably what happened, because I didn't want to drink water. So I was probably dehydrated. Who knows? But luckily, I sat there. I sat on the ground. I just got on the ground and sat there. That ground was probably really dirty, but I didn't want to use any effort. I didn't want my body to like exert any effort. So I sat there, and I was just like using my deep breathing, and then they checked my temperature again. Luckily, I was able to go in. But besides that, that was really the only hiccup that I had. But it's really interesting. I've heard stories where like some test sites will like pat you down to make sure you're not taking anything in. I've heard, like interesting stories where they're just not as friendly, and, it can be stress inducing in some ways, when you're having to lock up all of your items and you feel like you just don't have any, space, like comfort, all of your comfort is being taken away. So that was slightly interesting for this test for me.
It sounds like a lot to handle right before taking an exam. With 3 weeks of prep sounds like a lot, but you made it. For me, it was a long time coming. 2 months was, I think, a lot of studying for me. And the last week really was a lot more of the mental shift of, okay, what happens if there's a question I don't know the answer to? Like, well, that's going to happen. So it was more of a mental shift of being calm and collected and confident in my work and really doing the best I could in that moment. Because at that point, I knew what I knew. I didn't know what I didn't know. And all I could do is just try out my best answer and my best guess to have that clinical reasoning. So I remember just a few days before driving to the testing center, making sure I knew like where I was going, where I was going to park, and where there was food afterwards, because I had taken mine in the morning. So I would have come out and it would have been past lunchtime. And I know I like food. So I needed to know where the food was so that I didn't have to have like decision fatigue after the exam. But yeah, I didn't really sleep well the nights before. I had nightmares of either missing my like time or like the building to be locked or my car not to start, not having enough gas, all these like what ifs. But I'm a yoga teacher, so I really tuned into my yoga practice and my meditations and just moving my body, intuitively going outside and all of that, trying to recenter myself before the exam. And I just remember that day, like I'd prepped everything the night before. I'd prepped my like comfiest sweats and I was just so excited to like finally show that I was about to become an OT. And I like drive to the testing center and I'm super anxious and it's way early in the morning. And then I get there and I like walked into the building and it just felt so calm, like a weight had lifted off my shoulders. And I just felt so like powerful. And the fact that I was about to take this exam, I was really excited to be a part of this journey. And I was just thinking of my future clients and patients, like, we're doing this for you. And yeah, I got into the facility. I like did a few yoga sequences. Just, I didn't really care what other people were like seeing or standing in the building. I was just like, I'm just going to do my own thing here. I need to like get into a good space so that I can answer these questions the best I can. And I like drank some water, had a little snack, went to the bathroom, and then I like locked all my stuff up and then took the exam. And afterwards I had planned just to like go get my nails done and relax and take a really long nap and to reward myself after. So it was a lot of accumulation of feelings of studying for the last like 5 years and then feeling really refreshed afterwards.
So as you can see, the experience of preparing for the test was different for Emilio and Noémie, and the experience of going into the exam is also different. And Emilio, I wanted to wait until I heard from Noémie to comment on your experience. You didn't drink water because you didn't want to go to the bathroom.
I don't know. I have a baby bladder.
I couldn't. It was so funny. I was holding back my So, and then that ran of temperature, and then you ended up drinking, so you had to go 2 times.
It was running out of time.
So this is something that I actually thought about. I mean, many years ago too, I didn't want to drink too much water because going to the bathroom is a waste of time. Yeah. And Emilio, you brought up a lot of good points again, where you're like, 4 hours feels incredibly different, and 10 minutes and you have 30 questions left. I can't even imagine the panic. And so while Noémie was doing like, yoga and you were getting mentally ready, and then you walked in and you were calm, and Emilio was like, I gotta drink water to get my temperature down so I can be admitted to the testing center. And
very different.
It was different. So but, that's not to say, Emilio, that your experience was bad or it was the wrong experience, because I think the point of this is that it's unpredictable and everyone has a different experience. And I will never get tired of listening to people's on the day of the exam stories, because it is wildly different from person to person. And also, what you might expect of how you perform or how you might feel might be completely different. So you might go in thinking like, I'm not going to drink water. I'm probably not going to need to use the restroom. I've done my 4-hour practice in a sterile environment. So, I know what it's going to be like. But yeah, 4 hours feels different. It's quiet in there. Sometimes it smells. Sometimes it can be too hot, too cold. And so people's experiences are so different. I really enjoyed hearing about both of your experiences. But how, I know you touched on this. How did you felt calm after taking the exam? You felt good about it. How about you, Emilio? Did you have a sense of like how you performed, how well or didn't, how well you did, or you felt like you bombed it? I mean, how did?
Well, it's funny because I was telling you earlier that I write my own test questions, and I did the same thing for this test. I did this in grad school, all of grad school. I was very used to this. I was like, it was just my way of studying. And so I would actually grade my tests in grad school. So I'd walk out of my final exam and be like, dang it, I got an 89%. And sure enough, I would get like an 89% or very, very close. So when I walked out of this one, I was like, wow, I'm really teeter-tottering right in the middle. And I didn't know. I mean, of course, like that self-doubt, of course, creeped in. And so I didn't know if I passed or failed. I couldn't say one or the other. But I went home, and luckily my nephew was at home. We were kind of all just hanging out because we were going, in the middle of the pandemic, we could only see each other. And it just, was very nice because I got to surround myself with family, and it was just reassuring that whatever happened is not the end of the world, right? We could take this test again. It doesn't define who we are as a person or as a future practitioner. It's really, going in and, not just trying to pass this exam for the sake of passing this exam, but to be able to go out and share this knowledge and help others, and, what drives us to be therapists in the first place. So, yeah. It was interesting experience, though.
Noémie, I want to ask you, did you feel like, or how was your pacing strategy? Like, did you feel like you were running out of time, or did you feel rushed? Did you feel like you had enough, the allotted time was sufficient?
Yeah, it was definitely a challenge early on that I had found in my practice exams, was to keep to the time. So I really worked on it during my studying. And I found that if I took like a eye break, I call it, I would look away from the test towards like the window, just to neutralize my eyes from looking up close all the time, but just to give my mind a break. And sometimes it was just, having my eyes closed. But I found that if I took an eye break every like 20 so questions, I was able to pace myself at a rate and a rhythm that I felt like was more doable and manageable, to like, okay, I just need to get to, question 40 now, and then I can take a little break, recenter myself. I had on my scratch paper, I wrote my full name and OTR/L at the end. And I just like looked at that, like, I'm doing it. So that was one strategy. And I also had planned to take a larger break to eat a little bit of food, because I knew that I needed food during that time. And I like strategically packed it in my like little bag I brought into the testing center. And I like quickly went to the bathroom, and I tried to keep that time of my break time short so that I could get back into taking the test. But it is kind of figuring out what works for you, and maybe taking a little break every 20 minutes is not for you, but testing out if maybe you take like 60 questions, maybe you take 50, and after the like 100 mark, you take a break. But I do like that kind of little milestones to get to. And then it's like a final push at the end.
So I think those were all of my questions, but I do want, before we close out, I want to ask you guys, what can you recommend or suggest, or any words of encouragement or comfort for students that are taking the exam? If you could do something differently, or if there's something that you wish you had known, anything that you want to share?
No, I mean, do you want to go first on that one?
Sure. I would suggest to OT yourself. You've been studying this for however many years, and you're about to go practice as an OT. And I highly suggest knowing how to occupational balance yourself, finding the things that works for you, adapting things so that they work for you, and to really believe in yourself that you know more than you think you do, and that you can do this. And that I would also just do a lot of practice questions, and to study the things that you don't want to be tested on, because that's most often the things that you don't know as well. So those are my big suggestions.
Yeah, that was a really great suggestion. Thank you. How about you, Emilio?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree, especially with, the work-life balance, with the study, like balance. Reward yourself every day, plan something, whether it's a hike, going to the movies, whatever you can do, during your studying and even after. I'm pretty sure, I think you would just be more likely to study really hard and then know that you're going to have that reward afterwards. But a couple of things before we wrap up to share is, what really helped me when I had those what seemed like millions of questions at the end with like 10 minutes left. I remember, reading some test taking strategies, and, I went with my gut. I looked at those questions, and there's something's going to speak to you, because that's more than likely the right answer. So go with your gut. Never leave anything blank, like you mentioned. This exam will not dock you for the wrong, answer. And so I'm going to rephrase that. So going with your gut, and then also not having any blanks on this. Really focus on, if you have to flag something or maybe write down, I want to revisit question, whatever question it is. And then you can always go back, but you don't want to leave anything blank without addressing it. And then the third thing is, when I was going through these questions in a very fast pace, I was looking for these really key words, right? What is skilled? What is occupational therapy? And, is this our job or is this somebody else's job? So really focusing on, is OT the only discipline that can do it? Is this addressing the deficit that they explained in the questions? Because they will throw out, tests will often give you answers that are similar, and that's where you have to really focus on what the question is saying, right? Because I'll give you an example. Actually, when I was first starting grad school, I actually moved in with a third year, and so we went and grabbed coffee one day. They were studying for NBCOT, and we started taking practice tests together, questions. They were just throwing them out there. And I was the only one getting them right. And they were like so mind blown. Like, why is he getting them right? But this group of people that have gone through this entire program getting them all wrong. And I think what it was is, we kind of talked about this, was that, they have this wealth of knowledge. They're filled. Brains are just shoved with like all this information. For example, I'll give you guys a specific example of like sensory integration and individuals that tend to have those. You know, you hear the word autism and you start thinking sensory integration. But in the question, it had nothing to do with sensory integration, but your mind knows that that's a typical problem. So that's where your brain wants to go. When you see that on letter C, that's probably not the answer. You know, possibly, maybe not. But that's really addressing the deficit. That is the key to really finding the correct answer. So when you're going through those questions fast, you got to really be looking for those you know, words, keywords, and what's addressing the deficit. So that's really the final tips that I think I have.
Thank you so much. This was delightful. I really enjoyed having a conversation with you two, and I so much appreciate you sharing your time and your heart with us. All right, bye everyone.
Bye.
Bye.